2 weeks have gone by so far in this NFL season, and I gotta say, there have been quite a bit of upsets, and teams haven't been playing the way they were projected to play before the season started. So I'm going to break down what I think the power rankings are for every single team. To start off at 32, the obvious choice, the Panthers. This team was 2-15 last year, and they look like they're going to have the same record again this year. They just benched Bryce Young, but I think this team's problem is going way beyond just the quarterback position. I expect Young to be back in the lineup not too long in the future. I think this team will see there's still struggle, even with the quarterback change. At 31, the Denver Broncos. Another team that doesn't really have much going on for them. Don't see any promises in them moving up in the rankings, so I'll expect them to be bottom 5 throughout the entire season. Number 30, the Giants. Not much to say besides them needing to figure out a quarterback situation. Their defense has been looking alright, but they aren't good enough to carry their offense for them. Now with their kicker, it's forcing them to try and score touchdowns. Only upside to this team is seeing the potential of Neighbors. At 29, the Titans. Levis has been turning the ball over, and that's basically describing the tragedy of their start. This team has potential to be better than what they are right now, but they currently aren't showing it. At 28, the Commanders. A team that is going through a heavy rebuild with all new clientele. I think they are lucky to be 1-1, as the win against the Giants, they didn't score a single touchdown, and if the Giants had a kicker, the game potentially could have went into OT. Nobody expects this team to be good, and their goal should just be to not be last place in their division. At 27 is the Patriots. I think the Patriots deserve more credit, especially with their defense. They won week 1 against the Bengals while having the greatest odds to lose, and they almost pulled off another upset win against the Seahawks. I think the Patriots have the potential to be a surprise team of the year. Not saying they'll make the playoffs, but I think they have a good chance to not finish in the bottom 10 of the NFL. At number 26, the Jaguars. The Jaguars were just a playoff team in the past, but this year they start 0-2. I didn't think they would be some all-star team, but I expected a little bit more out of them than this. I think we just need to wait and see what this team can deliver within the next couple weeks. Number 25, the Colts. With the return of Richardson, I was hoping the Colts would be at least 1-1, especially since they played a Packers team without Jordan Love. They need to start racking up wins if they don't want to kiss their season goodbye. At 24, the Raiders. The Raiders didn't show much the first week, but the second week they came out with a huge win against the Ravens. Now it's up to them to show if that win was legit or if it was just a fluke. Number 23, the Bears. It's expected for the Bears to start off a little slow with their rookie quarterback, but Williams is showing potential, and being 1-1 to start the season, especially with a one-score game against a good Texans team, shows that they can still make an impact on this season. Number 22, the Rams. They showed potential in week 1 with a close loss to the Lions, but week 2's performance says otherwise. They need to show up and play consistently every week to become a threat. With playing the 49ers next week, it can either put a disaster to their season or give them hope. At 21, the Chargers. Another team that seems like they're doing pretty well, but too early to rank them any higher just for the fact that their dominating win last week was against the Panthers. But if they could pull off a win against Pittsburgh, I think they earn enough to rise up the standings. At 20, the Cardinals. With the return of Murray, this team has shown a little bit of light. They are 1-1 with a close loss against the Bills and a dominant performance against the Rams. If their offense continues to play this way, I can see them rising in the standings. At 19, the Dolphins. The week 2 horror show just leaves me uncertain for where this team should be placed. They have potential to be higher, but the way they looked last week says otherwise. Plus, the loss of Tua will put an even bigger dagger in them. Not sure where this team will be heading in the next couple weeks, but wouldn't be surprised if it's down. At 18, the Falcons. After a tough start for Kirk Cousins and the Falcons in week 1, they were able to bounce back and beat the Eagles in week 2. I think this team just needs a little bit of time for Cousins to get back in the rhythm of playing and adjust on being on a new team for them to really be successful. At 17, the Seahawks. Yes, the Seahawks are 2-0, but I still haven't been impressed by their offense. Both of their wins came from teams that are supposed to be in the bottom 5 of the NFL, and they barely won both games. If they don't show more dominance, they can decline in the rankings. At 16, the Browns. After a devastating loss against the Cowboys, the Browns pull off a win against the Jaguars. The Jaguars, I am still uncertain about how good they are, so that win could not mean much if the Browns will face harder competition in the future. They just need to prove that they are not a bottom pack team by destroying the Giants next week. At 15, the Packers. After almost beating the Eagles to losing Jordan Love, it seemed like they would be down 0-2 this season. But without their starting quarterback, they were still able to get a big win. Once Love returns, this team can have a really good chance to make the playoffs. At 14, the Vikings. Beating up on the Giants doesn't prove anything to the league, but beating the 49ers is a huge statement. They're a team to keep an eye out for. Just gotta wait and see if they are legit or just had a lucky start. At 13, the Steelers. Despite the fact that they have a struggling offense that is still deciding who their QB1 should be, their defense has been absolutely dominant. They won their first game without scoring a single touchdown. As much as they are riding off their defense, they need to find a way for their offense to produce more if they want to be one of those top 10 teams. At number 12, the Saints. They are a big surprise team for me. I thought the week 1 murder was just because they played the Panthers, but they came out and did the same thing against a dominant Cowboys defense. Kamara is playing like a top 3 running back like he did a few years ago. If they keep this up, they can make their way into the top 10. At 11, the Bengals. I'm going to give the Bengals the benefit of the doubt that they just didn't come out strong in week 1 and the Patriots being better than most people anticipated, but they did bounce back in week 2 against the Chiefs. Obviously, they still lost and no team wants to be 0-2, but the game was back and forth and they were close from beating the defending back-to-back Super Bowl champions. It all comes down to if they can win their next few games to prove they deserve this 11 spot. At number 10, the Jets. A decent start for a team considering the adjustment period they are going through with the return of Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers is one of the greats and it's tough going into a new organization, especially after a season-ending injury at his age. But I have faith that this Jets team will continue to get better and really learn what their identity is. They have a real shot at making the playoffs as long as they don't take any steps backwards. At 9, Tampa, a team that is 2-0 and had an impressive win against a Lions team that I think can potentially be a top 5 in the NFL. They're one of those teams where you feel like they will be in the middle of the pack before the season starts, but with a big win like that in week 2 can turn some heads. I think it's too early to decide how good this Tampa team will be, but they're definitely a team to keep an eye on. At number 8, the Bills. The Bills are 2-0, which is something you always want out of your team, but they still don't seem like a top 5 team yet. The first week, they barely won and was close to losing against the Cardinals. Those are the type of games they need to be making a statement with. Obviously, they can still be adjusting to the loss of Diggs, and I think this team will be fine without him, but they just need to continue that dominant energy they had from the Miami game to move up in the rankings. At number 7, the Cowboys. Another surprising upset loss, especially after dominating the Browns in week 1. It's possible that the Saints are a legit team and better than they expected, but that's still no excuses for the Cowboys to get blown out like this. Their defense is one of the best in the NFL, and they need to prove that every single game or the Cowboys will never be able to win a playoff game. Their offense is good enough to lead them to the playoffs, but they need everyone on their game in order to make a serious impact this year. At number 6, the Ravens. One of the biggest upsets of the week when the Raiders beat the Ravens. I feel like the Ravens are expected to be Super Bowl contenders, but they continuously not fully show up to games and reach their full potential. They are now 0-2. If they go 0-3, they will not even have a top 10 spot, maybe even worse. I think it's an issue that your team needs to rely on a quarterback to get 100 plus rushing yards for the team to be successful. I think they have a really good opportunity with both Andrews and Likely to be a huge duo threat at tight end, which will open up more opportunities for other receivers and running room for Lamar and Henry. At 5, the Lions. Very unfortunate loss for the Lions, but I still think even with that loss, they still have the weapons to be a top 5 team. The duo between Gibbs and Montgomery is some of the best you're going to get in the NFL, and also with a receiver like St. Brown. Tampa is a solid team that you can't take lightly, and the Lions just saw that. It's a long season, and I think the Lions need to beat the Cardinals next week by at least 2 scores if they want to stay in the top 5 spot. At number 4, the Eagles. The Eagles are now 1-1. Their roster on paper says they're a top 5 team, but between the loss last week and the near loss in week 1, I'd say they're on thin ice for dropping out of a top 5 spot. They desperately need to come out strong next week and show that they're still a powerhouse of the NFL. At 3, the Texans. Coming off a shocking and impressive second half of the season last year with outstanding performance of Stroud, the Texans keep that momentum and start the season off 2-0. It's clear that the team is still developing and not 100% where they need to be a Super Bowl contender yet, but if they continue to improve as the season goes on, just like they did last year, they can be a real threat in the playoffs. At number 2, the 49ers. Another shocking loss in week 2 against the Vikings. I don't think this calls for a concern in the future of their season. It is possible the Vikings are a better team than they were made out to be, but it's still a win the 49ers should have. It's hard missing their best player with CMC, but they had no problem with that in week 1. This loss was a minor setback for the 49ers, but I think they can bounce back next week against the Rams. At number 1, the Chiefs. Not much needed to say. Defending back-to-back champions. Still hasn't shown any signs of slowing down. Only part of concern should be watched over the next couple weeks. Pacheco is out for numerous weeks with an injury. Also, Mahomes threw 3 interceptions in just 2 games. Shouldn't be a huge concern, but you don't typically see him making many mistakes like those in the past. So that's my decision for my power rankings after 2 weeks of this NFL season. Let me know down below what you think the power ranking should be, what you agree with, what you disagree with, and gotta wait and see what happens in week 3, how teams will change.